This video is sponsored by Kamikoto. Go ahead, take it. The young woman says to her boyfriend as his eyes linger over the antique pistol in a glass case in front of them. It's an old, hand-carved piece from 1730. It reminds him of an old pistol his father once owned. That is, before he left him and his mother. This one is far nicer, and his eyes gaze over the ornate frame. He feels an urge to own it. We've all felt the need to have things from time to time, but for infamous art thief Stefan Breitwieser, that need went further than a simple impulse buy. Managing to steal 13 separate items over the course of 2 weeks from the same museum, this is the story of the greatest art thief in history. His hoard of stolen treasure of 140 pieces worth over $1.4 billion, and how a bugle brought everything crashing down around him. The couple is in a small museum in the French village of Thun. It doesn't have an alarm system, nor does it have any security guards, just volunteers to greet visitors at the entrance. Scoping out the display case, he can see that it's partially open, imagining how easy it would be to just slip the gun into his bag. Thinking how it would feel like if he just let temptation take him, now, with the support of the beautiful woman next to him, he snatches the pistol and the duo stroll out of the gallery. Going down in 1993, this was only his first heist, but his thirst for thievery wouldn't abate. In as little as 3 years, he managed to collect over 100 pilfered objects, squirreling them away in his attic hideaway. Stefan Breitwieser was born in 1971 in northeastern France, where he grew up speaking French, German, and some English. His father was a sales exec in Switzerland, while his mother worked as a nurse, sitting on antique Louis XV armchairs and getting dressed out of 200-year-old dressers reserved usually for royalty. That is, until his father left, taking his treasures with him. No more would the young Breitwieser taste the sweet luxury of antiques. And as he and his mother went from grand to bland, he knew only the bitter embrace of IKEA seats and second-hand furniture. It was at this time that he met his long-term girlfriend and alleged co-conspirator, Anne-Catherine Kleinklaus, his Bonnie to her Clyde. He fell for her almost instantly. "I loved her right away," he said. She was a beautiful woman with pixie-cut hair and, most importantly, shared his love for museums and beauty. She moved in with him and his mother shortly after his father left, and so began their relationship. With crime. Stefan believes that to become a good thief, you don't need just quick fingers, but a quick mind as well. You have to control your gestures, your words, your reflexes, he says in an interview with GQ. Breitwieser's modus operandi was to stick to small pieces, no painting larger than a foot squared, and ideally, he would remove it from its frame to hide it more completely. Occasionally, he stole weapons, but would never even think about using one. "It's disgusting to walk into a museum with a gun," he says. In that way, he is antithetical to both Bonnie and Clyde, who together murdered 13 people. In fact, the only tools he used were items that you probably have in your house as we speak. Namely, a screwdriver, a box cutter/knife, and a radio antenna to nudge prying security cameras out of the way. He didn't even wear gloves to obscure his fingerprints. That being said, he did also have an old ring of skeleton keys for opening antique cabinets. But I'm going to take a wild guess and say that most of us don't have one of those lying around. His greatest thefts, he believes, took place in Belgium at the Art and History Museum in Brussels. The museum employs approximately 150 guards at his estimation, but with his new plan, that wasn't going to be a problem. While there, he and Kleinklaus notice an empty display case. Nothing about it is particularly remarkable, aside from a laminated card inside that reads, "Objects removed for study." Breitwieser has an idea and filches the card. The key to this heist for Breitwieser is understanding how guards think. When he was 19, he briefly worked as a guard at the Historical Museum of Mulhouse near his home. He realized that guards are watching people, not the art on the walls and in display cases. Breitwieser returns with the Objects Removed sign to an exhibit displaying a case of 16th century silver pieces. To get into the case with the silvers, he uses a screwdriver to lever the slide door off. He peers inside, grabs 3 silvers, a drinking stein, and 2 small figurines. Then, he places the Objects Removed sign in the case and reattaches the sliding door before the 2 of them wander out. No one the Breitwieser. Come on, that's good. Typically, Klein-Klaus acted as a lookout, positioning herself in places where she could get a clear view of guards and guests, signaling her boyfriend with a cough whenever someone drew near. This time, however, she needs to participate more actively in this theft. He's forgotten the lid to the beer stein, and he can't leave a piece unfinished. Breitwieser, despite becoming the greatest art thief in history, said he never wanted to make money from the art he stole. In the small house he lived in with his mother, behind the locked door to his room slept a treasure hoard to rival even the most prolific Caribbean pirates. But he'd been broke ever since his father left. Occasionally, he worked as a waiter, making meager pay, while Klein-Klaus worked in a hospital as a nurse's aide to bring in some more cash. Making money off his stolen treasures wasn't his priority. He stole so he could have. In his own words, he would get smitten with inanimate objects. As a child, he obsessed over stamps, coins, postcards, and then later graduated to fragments of medieval pottery he could scavenge near archaeological sites. He describes it as coup de coeur, coup de coeur, coup de coeur. We'll come back to that. I'm gonna figure out the pronunciation.
Coup de cœur.
Translated directly to a blow to the heart, like love at first sight. He continues saying, "I can't help but weep. There are people who do not understand this, but I can cry for objects. It's like when I first laid eyes on the Kohimika 2000. It was like the Windows 98 of caffeine percolation." So here he is, antique stein in hand, without the lid. Klein-Klaus has an idea. Deftly slipping off one of her earrings, she returns to the museum with her boyfriend in tow. She approaches a security guard and explains that she lost an earring, and she thinks she knows where it might be. The guard lets them pass, and they return to the case. Breitwieser takes the stein's lid, along with 2 other goblets from another case. They get away, but as any crime buff knows, the culprit always returns to the scene of the crime. 2 weeks later, they return, in disguise of course. Klein-Klaus has changed her hair, and Breitwieser has grown out a beard. Inside the same case as before, the Object Removed sign remains. He takes this opportunity to grab 4 more things, including a 2-foot-tall chalice that is so beautiful that he ignores his usual size limit. He stuffs it up the left sleeve of his jacket and gives his walk an unnatural gait. En route to the exit, a guard stops them, asking for their tickets. Breitwieser, thinking for a moment that maybe his time has come, swallows his fear and remains cool as a cucumber. He can't move his left arm, so he reaches his right arm over to his left side pocket to fish out his ticket. His time as a guard comes back again to help him. He knows a guilty person cowers, tries to weasel out of a difficult situation, but an innocent person doesn't fear suspicion. He tells the guard that he and his girlfriend are going to lunch at the museum cafe. His suspicion lifted, the guard bids them farewell, and they go eat at the cafe. Breitwieser's arm still as stone all the while. 2 days later, they come back yet again after renting a cheap hotel room nearby. In fresh disguises, they stalk back to the case, and he manages to pilfer 4 more pieces to bring his total of stolen objects to 13 from this one museum alone. With the Objects Removed sign, no one knew anything was out of the ordinary. However, an inventory of objects in the museum might have uncovered the theft. Generally, museums do 3 kinds of inventories. Random spot inventories, where an employee verifies the location of a small sample of objects. Partial section-by-section inventories, where employees will check entire displays or storage locations. And finally, complete inventories, where every single object in the museum's files is located and verified. It was likely a combination of luck and perhaps some miscommunication and neglect on the part of the employees that allowed Breitwieser to get away with such an audacious number of objects. Such a victory is this that Breitwieser and Kleinklaus can't help but stop at an antiques gallery on the way back from their thieving spree in Brussels. In the front window sits an absolutely gorgeous silver and gold urn, and Breitwieser, as usual, must have it. He enters to scout the place, but as the dealer shouts from upstairs that he'll be down in a moment, he shoots his shot. When the dealer arrives, both Breitwieser and the urn are gone. The phone at his desk rings, and he picks up, responding cheerfully. A woman's voice on the other end asks about the price of the ancient urn in his front window. The dealer excitedly tells her that it's worth about $100,000 and adds, "Madam, you really must see it." Kleinklaus looks back at Breitwieser as he lovingly runs his fingers across the ornate silver and gold of his newly plundered treasure. The dealer hasn't even noticed that it's gone yet. When it comes to art crime, and all crime really, it's hard to find someone who has stolen from 10 different places. But by the year 2000, Breitwieser's score borders on 200 discrete thefts, amounting to over 300 pilfered treasures. For the 6 years between 1994 and 2000, he's averaged one theft every 2 weeks. In a single year, he was responsible for half of paintings stolen from French museums. Kleinklaus and Breitwieser did everything right. They constantly shifted their area of operation, moved between rural and urban areas, hit small and large museums, and even stole from churches, art auctions, and small galleries. I know one thing for sure. If this video's sponsor, Kamikoto, were making knives 100 years ago, they would be just the thing that Breitwieser would want to add to his collection.
Bro, are you telling me that they came in and you didn't immediately tell me?
Oh, I was telling a story.
Bro, when we get fantastic Japanese steel kitchen knives made using traditional techniques that date back to the Edo period, 400 years ago, you drop everything.
I didn't know you were interested in history.
Well, when it comes to fire and blade, yes. Kamikoto knives only use 100% Japanese steel from mills in prefectures like Niigata, Ibaraki, and Kanagawa, which means the quality is top-notch. Each knife is individually inspected before shipping, and they're so confident in the quality that each one of them comes with a lifetime guarantee.
I don't know much about knives, but I thought the box was nice.
Nice? Nice? Bro, this is a heavy-duty ash wood! Ash wood! The knife is stored safely, and it makes the Kamikoto knives a fantastic gift for even your most fancy schmancy cook friends. Kamikoto knives have single bevel edge, which means that they're already incredibly sharp. Their knives are even used by multiple Michelin star chefs across the world.
So, what do you think?
Well, first off, these knives look professional as hell. I felt like a real chef when I was using them to cut up some cabbage, cucumbers, an apple, and chicken, which was surprisingly easy to cut. Just feels so natural to hold even the first time you get your hands on one.
Kamikoto is having a massive sale just for our audience. And on top of that, you can get an extra $50 off any purchase with our discount code BREW. Click the link below or go to kamikoto.com/brew and use promo code BREW to save an extra $50 today. There are times that they are almost caught. One time, Breitwieser accidentally shatters a glass display case. On another occasion, he returns to his car holding portions of a 16th century altar, only to find a police officer giving him a parking ticket. He manages to convince the officer to let him off, all the while hiding priceless art underneath his jacket. Then, in Switzerland, the duo find themselves alone in a small gallery across the street from a police station. Kleinklaus, knowing the risk, urges him to do nothing. "I don't feel it. I'm telling you," she says. He can't stop himself as he spots a 17th century still life by Willem van Elst. It's a hot day, so Breitwieser doesn't have a jacket to conceal any purloined pieces. It seems easy to take, and he simply hoists it off the wall, slides it under his arm, and walks out as casually as possible. He doesn't get too far, as an employee of the gallery not only notices the disappearance, but also spots the couple as they try to leave. They're taken to the police station where their fingerprints are recorded and held for the evening. The two of them admit to the theft, and spin a yarn saying this was their first theft, and they're very, very sorry. The police are sympathetic, let them off with a slap on the wrist, and the two bolt, vowing to take a break from thieving and to never heist Switzerland again. But not 3 weeks later, he's back in action stealing a painting by David Vinkboons at an auction in Paris. Kleinklaus had been feeling less and less fulfilled with her life as an international art thief. The isolation of hiding a multi-million-dollar hoard of stolen art in their attic bedroom was getting to her. They could not have children, no friends could visit. They had been dating for 10 years, and if a single person saw the contents of their bedroom, the jig would be up. We lived in a closed universe, Breitwieser said, but it could not stay closed forever. The end was coming for the art world's Bonnie and Clyde. The two of them begin to argue more often, and Breitwieser starts working alone. Not only that, he begins plundering objects he otherwise wouldn't have, including a giant wood carving of the Madonna and Child, weighing 150 pounds, and a 10 by 10 foot 17th century tapestry that he didn't even have space to hang. Kleinklaus chastises him for stealing something they can't even appreciate, but he reassures her that as soon as they have a bigger living space, he'll hang it up. She looks at her measly paychecks and knows that it's just a distant dream. She makes him swear that he'll begin using latex gloves during his heists. With their prints on record now, Kleinklaus knows that even if she leaves him, she could still be connected back to his crimes. One day, he returns from a heist with a small hunting bugle dated back to 1580. Kleinklaus isn't interested. They already have a similar one, and he didn't wear gloves. Not only that, he stole it from a museum in Switzerland, the one country they swore not to rob again. He says that he'll go back and erase the prints, but she knows that's too risky. She decides she'll do it. They return to the Richard Wagner Museum, baking in a silent argument, and, for a brief moment, as they gaze over a beautiful lake bordered by the magnificent mountains of the Swiss Alps, he believes that maybe their love isn't dead yet. Kleinklaus gets out of his car and walks to the museum. Breitwieser, unable to sit still, promises not to go inside, but walks around the perimeter, watching his girlfriend through the windows. It's a quiet day, and there's only one person nearby, an old man walking his dog. Moments later, Kleinklaus exits the museum in an almost jog. Breitwieser becomes nervous. They're very careful to never appear like they're escaping. Before he can fully understand her expression, police arrive behind him, place him under arrest, and stuff him in the back of one of their squad cars. Breitwieser spends that night, November 20th, 2001, in jail, and the following morning, his interrogation begins. At first, he denies everything, but the police reveal they have 2 eyewitnesses of his crime. The dog walker, a retired journalist, saw Breitwieser acting oddly, and having read an article on the Richard Wagner theft in that morning's paper, thought to notify the cashier at the front desk of the museum. The cashier then saw Breitwieser, recognized him as one of the only 3 people they saw the day of the theft, and called the police. Kleinklaus overheard this conversation and rushed to warn her boyfriend. In the interrogation room, Breitwieser knew that the only way he could wriggle free from the iron grip of the law was to ensure that the cops didn't connect him to his other thefts. He claims that he was in financial trouble and wanted to get his mother a Christmas gift, stealing the bugle not for its value, but because he thought it was shiny. He stews in jail for weeks, and over time, learns that the police actually never even considered dusting for prints. But the police had now connected him to his previous jail time in Switzerland. Swiss authorities obtain an international warrant to search his home. It takes some time, but 4 weeks later, the police arrive at his home in France. Hoping to find the bugle and possibly other stolen objects, they knock on the door and greet his mother. She says she has no idea what they're talking about. She allows them into the house, and they begin their search. Finding nothing, they move to the second floor. Step by step, they grow closer to Breitwieser and Kleinklaus's stash. They open the door, peer into the attic bedroom, and find nothing but a bed and empty walls. The police bring Breitwieser to the interrogation room shortly after New Year's 2002 and reveal photos of various objects. They seem off, sort of discolored, but they're definitely his. They tell him they know he stole those objects, and he confesses. Then, they pull out a stack upon stacks of photos of all sorts of things from his attic hoard. The investigator is shocked. He didn't actually think Breitwieser had stolen any of the objects, let alone over 140 of them. But as the police nail him to the wall, he notices a little note at the top of the police report. Objects found in the Rhone-Rhine Canal. He suddenly realizes why his pieces were discolored. They were discovered soaking in the mud at the bottom of a canal. He's horrified, but his horror only continues. What about the paintings? None of us know exactly what happened that fateful day as Klein-Klaus returned to their home alone. According to Breitwieser's insight and police intel, we can assume that Klein-Klaus drove in a panic where she revealed their situation to his mother. He imagines his mother looking over his plunder, thinking about how she had been housing and feeding her 30-year-old son, only to have him repay the kindness by hiding multiple felonies worth of stolen goods in her attic. In his mother's eyes, his treasure might as well been nuclear waste, irradiating her with its foul energy. From then, Klein-Klaus and his mother began clearing the entire room, stuffing everything into garbage bags. They put as much of the loot into his mother's car as they could, and drove it over to the canal, dumping it in the water, hoping none of the morning joggers and cyclists would notice. Fortunately for the police, and unfortunately for Breitwieser, someone did notice, and after spotting a glint in the water, came back with a rake to find a gold chalice. Breitwieser's mother and Klein-Klaus took some of the larger objects and littered them in various places nearby. The statue of Madonna and Child was returned to the church it was stolen from. The tapestry was dumped on the side of the road, and 3 paintings on copper panels were chucked into a wood. All of the items were eventually recovered, albeit with some damage. The tapestry was actually taken to a local police station where it was used as a pool table, while the copper panels were nailed to a logger's henhouse to keep the rain out. The paintings were the last item on the list. They were the centerpiece of his hoard and accounted for the majority of the value. Breitwieser imagines his mother piling up everything from Cranach to Bruegel, Teniers to Dürer, Von Kessel and Doe, stacked up in a terrifying mound. Each of these pieces has seen the rise of the United States of America, the fall of the French Empire, and the dawn of the Information Age. Those paintings watched as 300 years of bloody history passed them by, only to find themselves at the hands of a betrayed mother. She takes out a lighter, strikes the flame, and sets the pile alight. The fire moves slowly at first, crawling along the oil-soaked canvases, before the flames grow and lash like some kind of monster, consuming 300 years worth of art in just a few minutes. Breitwieser, after all is said and done, is sentenced to 4 years in prison. He's given a shorter sentence since none of his heists were violent, and the value of stolen items has no bearing on sentence, merely that they were stolen. That said, the value was about $1.4 billion at the time. In prison, Breitwieser was psychologically evaluated. He was so distraught by the destruction of his collection that he was placed on watch to make sure he didn't hurt himself. He was also noted to be arrogant and hypersensitive, and believed himself to be indispensable to mankind. However, psychological staff maintained he didn't fit the diagnostic criteria for kleptomania. Kleptomania is typically the uncontrollable urge to steal things you don't need, and usually have little value. Since he stole specific items of specific value, he did not fit the definition. Breitwieser's mother went on to trial and spent a few months in jail for the destruction of the art. She told the court that she believed it was all junk and didn't know that it was stolen property. He backed up his mother's claims, saying that he kept her shut out of most of his life and never allowed her into his room. Kleinklaus, luckily, spent only a single night in jail. Breitwieser vehemently denied her involvement in any crimes whatsoever. Furthermore, she denied knowing that any of the items were even stolen. It worked, and she was never charged with the destruction of art nor any thefts. She was only charged with knowledge of the thefts. In prison, Breitwieser wrote to her often, admitting his deep love for her. He hoped that she might be the one thing left of this time in his life. But shortly after his arrest, she entered a new relationship. By the time he got out of prison in 2005, she was the mother of a new baby, and he knew he'd never see her again. Going forward, it seemed at first that Breitwieser had changed his ways. But after attempting to sell a 19th century paperweight on eBay in 2016, police found Roman coins, other pieces from French and German museums, and 163,000 euros in a case hidden in his mother's home. It just goes to show that there really is no honor amongst thieves.